Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and I hate it here. For this video, I recruited all of my friends of color, or most of my friends of color, to put together a video in which they describe times in which they felt oppressed, whether that be through microaggressions, having positive or negative stereotypes expected of them, even outright racism. And the text, which I'll insert right here, is exactly what I sent, just as a frame of reference. I think it makes a lot of sense for me to start off, as well as my channel, but also because I have two important stories I need to tell you, which obviously they are not the two only times that I've experienced racism or some kind of problematic behavior in regards to race. The two stories that just will stick with me for the rest of my days, either until justice is served towards it, which for one of them is one that happened in junior high. I doubt will ever happen because it didn't happen then. And then the other one, maybe, if the people reach out. So it's gonna be time to share my stories, and then after that, I'm going to hand it off to all my friends of color that were able to send out a video, whom I'm first of all very grateful for. So I'm going to start with one where it just kind of really solidified that I was standing out because of the color of my skin. This was back in junior high when I was in choir. And, spoiler alert to anybody who knows me, and this is not a fucking shocker, I am a very talkative person. I'm not going to try to deny that in this story, though that doesn't justify what went down, but I just want to preface it with the fact that yes, I am a very talkative person. One time we were sitting in choir, and I feel like she must have given me like one warning for like talking too much or whatever. And also just to say, I would never be like disrespectful towards a teacher, I just talked a lot. It's just because I got easily distracted, whatever. And then the second time around, she goes, "Maya, I'm gonna whip and hang you if you don't stop talking." And she didn't even say it like that. She like said through her teeth, she's like, "I'm gonna whip and hang you if you don't stop talking." Needless to say, I stopped talking for the rest of the damn day. No one said anything. There was a black girl in there other than myself. When I got out of class that day, it was as if like someone just took the life out of me. Because at the time, I surrounded myself with a lot of white friends. I'm not saying I didn't have any friends of color, but it was very limited. Maybe I had like 2 at the time. And so I was conditioned to recognize racism, but like never really talk about it in the presence of my white friends, because it's like I just knew they wouldn't get it, so I just like, why bother? My closest friends at the time who were white, I told them what happened, and one of them was like, "Oh no, that is absolutely fucking ridiculous. I cannot believe she said that. Like, that is not okay." And it's so ironic because I know she's a Trump supporter now, so it's so ironic that she had the knowledge back then, but now she's stupid like that. But anyway, I remember when I got into the car, when my dad picked me up, I told him what had happened, and for the rest of the day, I was trying to convince myself, I'm like, maybe she didn't mean it like in a racial context, even though it's still a horrible thing to say to a student, regardless of their color. I was just trying to like process it. Not that I ever thought that like I deserved to hear that, but like it was just like a maybe there's some kind of justification for it. And the moment that the recap of it left my mouth to tell my dad was like, "Oh no. I'm going to email my coworkers and tell them I'm going to be in the office late tomorrow. We are going to the principal and we're going to talk about this." And so we did. Me, my mom, my dad, my choir teacher, and the principal all sat in like their conference room, and we talked about it. And lo and behold, this Karen, my choir teacher's name wasn't Karen, but like she is such a Karen, she started crying. She said something incredibly, unavoidably, unequivocally racist, and her white tears came out. What? It's just like, cause this bitch had the audacity to cry when she committed the oppression. So she was crying. My parents and I were all just with our arms folded being like, are we supposed to feel sorry for this bitch? Because we don't. And then the next time we had crier, which was later that day, she apologized to the whole class, because I'm assuming the principal told her to apologize to the entire class. And non-black people were like, "We forgive you." One person, who was actually just not a liked person in junior high by most people anyway, which is kind of ironic, but anyway, that's besides the point. She had the audacity to say like, "Oh, that's not really a big deal," which also reminds me, I remember when I made a stink about it, all these white people were like, "Maya's making a big deal out of nothing. She's just being overdramatic. She's being too sensitive." I know that came out of her mouth behind my back, but then now I also knew that this girl said this to our face, had the audacity to say that it wasn't that big of a deal, as if it affected her directly when she was not black. I am not a confrontational person, but I literally turned to her and I was like, "You don't get to decide that." I was just so fed up, because I was like, wow, literally no solidarity whatsoever, except for like 2 or 3 white people who were like, "That's not okay." While she was doing her apology, she again broke down in tears. Second time these fucking white tears from this stupid ass bitch came out. She She literally was the one who committed the foul act, and everyone was like, no, it's okay. I'm almost positive that someone at some point went up to give her like a side hug. Like, are you fucking kidding me? No one gave me the side hug. Not that I wanted their pity, but a matter of like,
oh, it's just like, not that big of a deal.
Shut the fuck up. God.
That was a time of many in which I was like, wow, I can just be existing. Albeit, yes, I was talking, but I just don't think in any fucking world would it be okay to tell someone when they've been talking too much to threaten them with lynching. Is that not the very fucking definition of lynching? And then she basically, obviously, got a slap on the wrist because she got to retire a couple years later. And I will never forget, because that was 8th grade when that happened. I was at a choir concert once I got to high school, so she had her junior high choir there, and she had the audacity to be like,
Oh, hey, Maya, how are you? How have you been? I'm so glad to still see you sing.
and I'm just like, oh my God, I have never just wanted to go like to anybody more in my entire life at that point in time. Yeah, so that was a story in which I realized, wow, I am Black and I have little to no allies surrounding me, and I'm just getting hateful, racially charged words because I was talking too much. The next one I must preface because I know that essentially everybody involved is gonna watch this video because it was fairly recent, so it's like friends that like I currently keep in touch with. And I'm obviously not gonna mention names. I don't dislike anybody that I'm referring to necessarily. I lost a little bit of respect here and there for each person who was complacent. A lot of these people are very near and dear to my heart. I'm just incredibly, not to sound like a mom, incredibly disappointed in them. I went on a trip with some friends, and one of the nights we were trying to decide on a movie to watch. One of the options was White Chicks. And my friend of color was like, oh yeah, White Chicks is funny, but it is a little racist towards white people. I was like, prejudice, because you can't be racist towards white people because you can't oppress the oppressor. And what really gets me is that it wasn't a white person who decided to interject their opinion. It was a Black man who said,
that's not true. Reverse racism is real.
And I said, the definition of racism is the systematic oppression of those disadvantaged in comparison to the fucking oppressor. Let me throw up the fucking definition up here in literal terms. Either way, I gave him the definition of racism and how it's a systemic thing, and he's like,
that's not true, that's not true.
And I was like, I'm not about to argue with you. And I said that out loud, but internally it was like, I'm not about to argue with you in front of all these white people because they live for this. Not these specific white people, but white people in general, whenever they have their personal opinions on racism and how it is showcased in real life, I feel like they have this kind of inkling where they kind of like to see Black people go back and forth at it, because then they're like, well, if you guys don't have a firm grasp on what it is, then like we can kind of do whatever. So I hate unless it is a genuine conversation and not just some combative conversation, having to talk about race in these kinds of contexts in front of white people. The minute that happened, the minute that little altercation happened, it was dead silent. Let me just like, to make sure that she doesn't think that like I'm like misrepresenting her side of it, the friend who I corrected, she literally was like, no, you're right, like you can't oppress the oppressor, you're right. So like, this is not some kind of ill will towards her because she recognized like, hey, that I misspoke. So this is not anything towards her, because I know she's gonna watch this, and obviously love you. You accepted the correction and I love you for that. But need I remind you that half of the people who were on this trip, and there were probably about 15 of us, were people of color. Not a single one of them contributed. Not a single one of them. That entire trip, I was the person where if someone said something a little off, I would be that girl. I would be that girl. I would, I guess, fall into that angry Black woman trope. The junior high thing happened so long ago that like I've made my peace with it. Do you guys ever, and like y'all are human, so probably, have those like events that have happened in your life that may have not been like incredibly traumatic, like in terms of like any physical injuries or anything regarding to like mental abuse or anything like that, but just something where it was like you knew what had happened to you just wasn't right? And so every single time that thought of that scenario randomly pops in your head, it kind of ruins your day. Since that time, and that was like back in like October of 2019, anytime that scenario pops into my head, it ruins my day. My heart gets heavy. I can't think about anything else. I start to tear up a little bit, even if I'm in the middle of class and I'm thinking about it, because it just baffles me that there were at least 7 other people of color on that trip, in that room, dead silent, not standing up for me in this entire thing. And so you know what I did? I went to one of the rooms and I had a big ass panic/anxiety attack and was crying and crying and crying. And then eventually like someone came in and saw me crying, another friend of color, and I told her what happened, and her justification for it was like, well, he's like I really don't want to misconstrue her words, but like she kind of just implied it's like, well, he's not really like super in your face about being black, you know what I mean? And like that's what other friends of color said when they started realizing like I'm having a panic attack and I'm crying and they're not used to seeing me crying. And what just hurt me that entire night was the fact, it was like not the ignorance of that anti-black black boy who apparently has had a history of being anti-black. It was the fact that like there were several people of color, because it's like at this point to expect a white person to stand up besides like the last 2 weeks is what's that fucking, I'll insert the clip from that Hillary Duff movie.
Because waiting for you is like waiting for rain in this drought. Useless and disappointing.
It was the fact that it was like there were enough people of color to where statistically speaking one of them should have spoken up. I mean, if they care about me enough, they're not gonna like what I'm about to say, but I still hold resentment. But that was one of those things where it was like, I hate being boxed into the angry black woman stereotype, but I basically had to be that night. I was pissed. I tried to alleviate the pain by like going out and being social again with the friends, but it was just like, I just cannot believe that there were so many people there that know what it's like to struggle, including other black people aside from that black man. And just no one said anything. And they just kind of justified the shit by being like, well, he's not really involved in the black community. I'm like, okay, so why be anti-black? Imagine being anti-black when you're black. Imagine being anti-black in general. But imagine being anti-black when you're black. You hate to see it. Needless to say, I cut ties with him. I unfollowed him on everything. But yeah, anyway, I got riled up. I'm sweaty and shit. Now I want to hand it off to my friends as they talk about the times in which they have realized that they were a minority in America. What I want you to take away from what I've just provided to you guys is that I need people to start normalizing, not assuming that people of color know exactly what they're talking about at all times. Because for example, that black dude claimed that reverse racism is real in this political climate. So not all of us know what we're talking about. And I'm never going to claim that I am like the Malcolm X of our generation or the fucking Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks or whatever. I know I have so much to learn, but at least I'm making the active change. I don't know if he's making the active change because as I said, we do not follow each other on social media anymore, but I hope people like him especially. I hope that when my friends of color who are on that trip see this video, not in some kind of guilt trippy kind of way, but understand like how that's something that they probably don't even remember until I just brought it up now. But like that's something that like once a month, at least once a month, ruins my day because I think about, wow, I've never felt so alone in a room full of people in my entire life. And that is something where I am still to this day very disappointed in them. And I know they're doing better via social media, and I just really hope to see it in real life from them. So this is a call to action to y'all. This is a call to action to people of color who routinely, black people included, routinely don't speak up. I'm so sick of being the one to be like, hey, that's incorrect. That's oppressive. That's racist, that's sexist, that's homophobic, that's transphobic, that's xenophobic. So I'm not saying I'm gonna stop doing it, but I need a little help. Because I am not the end all be all. Please help a sister out. I should not be the prophet. I refuse to be. Let me say before I get into this compilation of videos that the first videos are going to be of my black friends, and that's intentional. Right now the focus is on like healing the hurt of the black community through active change, whether it be politically, socially, economically, what have you. So you're gonna see all my black friends go first with their personal stories, and then you're gonna see the remainder of my friends of color that aren't black. Let's get on into it.
The first time I realized I was blackity black was probably second grade. Jalen Wright came into our class. She was an African American girl. And the moment she walked into class, I realized that I had been the only black person in class from kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And it was a moment of like, you look like me and kind of talk like me, and I want to be your best friend. And I kind of started disassociating from other people in the class. My teacher noticed it, my white teacher. She came up to me, she said, "Tyne, don't stop talking the nice way you talk to try and talk like Jalen." And at the time, I didn't know what she meant by it. But Miss Reardon, you did it wrong, sis. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Shout out to Jalen, I love her so much. And from then on, I just kind of realized that I was always the only. Me and her, all the way till 6th grade. The first time I experienced racial discrimination because I was a blackity black was also in 2nd grade. I did the science fair with a girl named Jennifer, an Asian American woman. She's amazing. She actually said that her mom said to stop hanging out with me because I was a bad influence. And at the time, I didn't know what the heck she meant by that, but I knew it really hurt my feelings. And I knew that her mom didn't like me because of nothing that I did. And about 3rd or 4th grade, I finally realized that it was because I was Black. And I came over to her house and I talked differently than her. But we got an A on that science fair project though. So how's that?
Okay, so the 3 most memorable times I realized I was Black are as follows. The first time is when we learned about slavery in 5th grade. I grew up kind of sheltered, so I had no idea what it was before then. And so I was very surprised, thought that was kind of different than what I was used to learning about school. Then carry on to when Trayvon Martin died. That's when I kind of began to get more of a grasp on like the concept of race and the concept of being Black in America. And then I have to say the 3rd time was like now, duh. I think every Black person in America is like, okay, you know, like look at the, you know. I think it's just very unfortunate that we are in the place in society that we are today, and I think that's going to change relatively soon, or at least I hope it changes soon. And I know like change takes time, but I feel like I'm just ready to see it change. I think we're all ready to see a change. America, your rent is overdue.
Hey y'all, I'm here to talk about the time that I first realized that I was Black. Honestly, I mean, I've been Black my whole life. It's been so long. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when it hit me, but I do have like this distinct memory of a moment when I realized that I was really considered to be different than people who weren't Black. It was when I was in middle school and I was with some friends and an academic tutor, and that day I had worn like an Afro puffball for the first time to class, and I was actually feeling a little insecure about it. And so when I was like leaving class to go to the restroom, someone said like when they thought that I couldn't hear them anymore, that my hair looked like a mad scientist. And then everyone laughed, including the people in there who I thought were my friends and the tutor. So that kind of affected me a lot, because the people who I expected to support me no matter in what ways that I was different from them really didn't. And it made me kind of think that there are like part of being Black is realizing that there are going to be people who will smile to your face and act like your Blackness is okay. Behind your back, you know, they might not be supporting you the same way. So that was one of my first memories of realizing that I was Black and that I was different than a lot of my non-POC friends.
I don't think there was ever a single time where I realized I was Black. For me, being Black has been more of a learning process, you know, through time. Just and looking back on experiences that I've had and, you know, reframing them with the knowledge that I have as, you know, a young adult. I compare my experience as a Black man to kind of like being born in front of like a big picture. And, you know, when you're little, you don't really understand what the picture means or even what it is. But as you get older, you take steps back and you start to see more and more of it, and you know, once you're grown, you see the whole thing, and it starts to make sense to you, because now you can see all of it, and now you can understand all of it. Not everything is in position, so it's just been about reframing what I already know and understanding it through the lens of, you know, an older person. And, you know, now I understand why, you know, that teacher got me and all the other dark-skinned kids in trouble. Now I understand why my mama was yelling at me for having my hoodie up all the time. And now I understand why me and all my friends are afraid of police, because we Black. But, you know, with every new experience and every new bit of understanding comes a newfound appreciation, and I get a little bit more comfortable in my skin, just because I understand more of myself and more about my people. Being Black is something that cannot be imitated or replicated, though the world may try through fashion and art and TV, you know, through every medium. It seems like the world is trying to copy and paste what Black people create and what Black people are, but they can never do it, because what we have is completely unique, and I find that beautiful.
I think the first time I can vividly remember sitting there and realizing that I'm Black and I'm different is in my kindergarten class. I went to a predominantly white elementary school, and I was the only black girl majority of the times in my classes. So in kindergarten, I was, it was my first day of school. I'm so nervous, and teacher constantly was asking questions, and we were all raising our hands trying to answer questions, and every time I raised my hand, she would never pick on me. And I was just thinking, okay, it's just the first day of school. It continued on like that for months. Like, I would always raise my hand. She would constantly ignore me. She would purposely act like she won't see me. And so I just gave up. I never really tried in class. I didn't speak up anymore. And so it got to a point where I wasn't really active in class, and they put me in ESL. They put me in a class to learn English because they thought I couldn't speak English, and it was a second language for me. And my short time in that ESL class, I was so happy because the teachers were taking their time with me. They were talking with me. Mind you, I didn't need the class. Like, I knew English. It was my first language. And so my mom found out, I think, around 3 weeks after I was put into the class, and she was livid. She was so upset because they didn't ask her. She never granted her permission to put me in the class, and she came up to the school and she was like, why did you put my daughter in this class? She doesn't need ESL. She is great with English. She can speak it. She can write it. She is reading above her grade level, so what's the problem? They straight out the bat told my mom and stated that I wasn't active in class, I didn't speak, and also being that I'm a first generation African, they automatically assumed that I couldn't speak English. So sitting in that conference made me realize, wow, I'm different because of my skin color. And that has always really resonated with me. And I often find myself looking back on that time, and it did cause a real big shift in me, especially in the aspects of my education, because now I push myself so hard to be better than anyone else. I always push myself to be the best of the best so that no one can ever question where I am, how I got here, and that my grades are just a huge reflection of me. And it's been a really stressful experience because of that. Like, having your whole self-worth placed on grades in education is not healthy at all. But for me, that's how I felt like I could really show people that I'm more than my skin color. And that's something that quickly kind of turned as a downfall, especially in college, because I was like, okay, grades aren't everything, so who am I? Who is Abina outside of her skin color, outside of the grades? So that was something that has stayed with me and is still with me to this day.
The times that I realized that I was black, and even more generally not white, was all through grade school, even followed me into college. I grew up in Minnesota. It's a very, very Caucasian area, a lot of German, a lot of Nordic people, but I don't look anything like most of the people that I went to high school with. And so I grew up with some latent racism around me. I got called Oreo a lot, Amidst. I got called, frankly, some other slurs that I don't even feel super comfortable repeating. But even recently, one of the kids that I grew up with, that I was even more friends with, he called me up. I hadn't talked to him in a few years, and he apologized for being complacent with all of the racism that happened in my middle school and even the beginning of my high school days. And it kind of mellowed out into high school a little bit with sports, and this has come in and followed me into college. People don't assume that I'm in college for academics. When I was first visiting SMU, I went to Bubba's Chicken down the street, and I got asked, oh, what's your position? When I said I was an incoming freshman, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, oh yeah, on the football team. You're on the football team, right? Like, I'm here on an academic scholarship. I'm an engineer. Like, I'm not here for sports. And even more recently, this last year, before COVID happened, we moved out. One of the lunch ladies was like, oh, you got basketball practice tonight? I'm 5'9". I have nothing similar with a basketball player, and I mean I can only assume where these ideas came from, right? But there's a lot of unconscious bias and things that have crept into my own head, right? Whenever I'm in a position or like a job through middle school, high school, even now, there's always a part of me that's like, well, did I earn this position because of my own accolades, because I worked hard, and or is this a diversity thing? Am I the only black person in the room, and do I feel like I'm just kind of here for my black opinion? And that will probably follow me for the rest of my life. But that came about as a compilation of kind of being different and just kind of being that one colored kid, right? Everyone else, my lower middle school, high school, college less so, but I mean SMU's PWI. It's just there's a lot of unconscious things that I can't point to directly, but they're there. It's a lot.
So technically, I've always known that I was black, right? I was raised learning about the Civil Rights Movement and Black History Month, and I knew historically that there has always been a difference in how black people are treated, people of color are treated, and how white people are, right? I mean, I was raised in a small town in the South, so I mean, you'd have to literally be blind to not see that there's a difference in general. But like specifically, I really didn't experience that. I think that my mom sheltered me from a lot as a little kid. Both of my parents did. And so I didn't really have like a personal story. Like if you were to ask me, you know, what discrimination have you faced or whatever, it was never anything like in your face. And even when I did first experience it, it was really subtle to the point to where I didn't really miss it. I didn't really notice it. As a matter of fact, I grew up being considered an Oreo by, you know, country cousins and the black kids that went to the school with me because I talked proper and most of my friends were white and I didn't listen to rap music, but you know, that was my environment. I didn't care about them. I just saw it as them being jealous of me being, you know, considered a smart kid. And so, you know, haters gonna hate basically. That was my mental. I didn't really trip over it that much. I was just like, whatever, I'm me, that's fine. But then in middle school, I remember I was in this certain class. It was like an honors English class. Let's just call it that. My teacher was talking about how she, I guess, had to fill out some kind of form that talked about like the diversity of her class. She basically had to register the diversity of her class. And I wasn't the only person of color. I was black. I was the only black girl, the only black person. There was another girl who was Indian, but you know, it was just us two. And I remember her telling me specifically, whatever form it was, asked if she had any minority students. And she said that she initially checked no. And then she had to stop and think about it and then go back because she said, I don't consider you a minority, Kennedy. Like, I don't see you as a minority. I don't consider you that. I just see you as Kennedy. And I was just like, okay, thanks. Like, she said it like it was this grand thing. And I was just like, okay, thanks, I guess. Because I didn't really get the whole minority thing. But I do remember that day when I got in the car, my mom asked her typical, how was your day? I was telling her about everything that happened. And then I said what the teacher said to me. And I remember her face, because, you know, I do have a sense of self-preservation. I remember her face shifting from just casual to irritated and being like, what did she say to you? And I got hesitant because, again, sense of self-preservation. And I was just like, she said she didn't consider me a minority. I didn't know what she meant by that. And I didn't know what the deal was. And I just knew that my mom was upset because whatever she said, it wasn't the right thing to say. And yes, the teacher was white. Because of that, on that car ride home, my mom had to explain to me what it meant that I was a minority. So I knew that minority meant that, you know, lesser than, greater than, lesser than, majority, minority. I got that. I understood that. But why was I a minority? So she had to explain to me that legally I am classified as a minority, that the government classifies me as that. It doesn't have anything to do with the number of people in the US or even in my town, but because I am black and because historically, you know, as slaves, we were considered the minority, the minors, you know, we were considered lesser, that even now today, that's what I am classified as. Even now, this is still the white man's country. I had to learn that because a teacher who was supposed to be, you know, building me up, still had that mentality, and that she was doing something bold by defying that and breaking me out of whatever mold or stereotype that me being a minority meant. But, you know, like, being black was something bad. And that might not have been what she was trying to say, but that's pretty much what she said, and my mom knew that, and my mom had to tell me that at 12. And after that, I guess that's when I realized that it wasn't just that I was trying to act white, or that I wasn't black enough, as I heard when I was little, but that people didn't see me, or didn't want to associate me with, I guess, the black stereotype, because I was smart, because I didn't look like, I guess, the typical black person, whatever that's supposed to be. I guess because I wasn't hood or ghetto or anything like that. I wasn't really black. I wasn't really a minority. Yeah, that's not really Kennedy, you know. She's smarter than that. And it reared itself again, you know, when I got older in high school, when I remember when Trayvon Martin was shot and police brutality became relevant in the news again, for once. And we were talking about it in school once again, being the only black, because it was a small school in a small town, and having to defend the fact that this isn't okay, that this wasn't right, that it didn't matter what they were doing, that they should have never been, the cops should have never escalated the situation against white boys who thought that if you just listen and do as you're told, that nothing will happen, and that if you're looking suspicious, then yes, of course the cops have to be on their guard. That, you know, it's not really their fault that they were wary. I wouldn't see you in that situation. You know, you wouldn't do that. You would never be in that type of environment. And thinking to myself, how do you know that? You know, saying out loud to them, why wouldn't I be in that environment? You're not like them, Kennedy, you know. Either you're too smart, or you're not like those people, or you're not like those types. What is those types? They were black. I am black. What's the difference? That could have been me. That could have been me in that situation. What makes them look suspicious and what doesn't make me look suspicious? Because they're dudes? No, because there's women who've experienced this too. How am I exempt? Am I really exempt? Or are you just exempting me because I'm too smart to fit into your ideal of the black stereotype?
In your message, you mentioned like your experience with microaggressions, and people think that they're very minor because it's called micro, but they're so powerful in how they affect you in the macro. Example, I lost my job because of a microaggression. So me and a few friends that I met through our position in the RA, like our college dorms, and we were on pretty much an all-white staff, and we had pretty much all-white supervisors. We had a few black ones, but like, you know, skin folk ain't always kin folk, so I'm gonna just say that on that. They treated us so like disrespectfully, and they asked us to like come in and teach diversity and inclusion, and so when we tried to do that, they didn't like the way it was done. So it just takes me back to the situation that's happening now with No Name and J. Cole, where it's like, you ask us to educate you, and then you don't like the way we do it. Then do it your goddamn self. Not the point. So, regardless of all of the drama that I had within that job, which was a lot, I felt like I was doing a good job. Like, I was doing all of my duties well. I never had issues with anyone on our staff. I got really high marks on my evaluation. My supervisor always had good things to say about me. So when I interviewed to get my position back for the next school year, I didn't get rehired. And I asked my supervisor when I went into a meeting, like, why didn't I get my position back? Like, I thought everything was great. I thought I was doing a great job. You said I was like a great RA, so what the fuck? She's like, well, we were just talking with the staff, and we just felt like you and some of your friends in your group are just a little bit intimidating to others on the team. Intimidating? Oh, because me, my indigenous friend, and my black queer friend, we all want to teach diversity and inclusion, and we want to be about it and not just talk about it. That's intimidating. Lost my job, dude. Over a fucking microaggression. So it's like, no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you do, it's just not the same. A microaggression. cost me my job. Like, to this day, I think back and I'm like, it was such a blessing in disguise because I hated that job. I really did not want to work there again, especially because my 2 friends weren't going to be there with me. And I was like, I can't even, like, even if I were to get rehired, I think I would have been miserable as fuck. So I guess that was my white blessing. God, the shit people are saying on social media right now. Oh my gosh, dude. Like, it's just nuts how these little actions that people think are so minuscule can really affect people in the long term. And you don't see it because you're not living it. And until you know someone who is, and until you invite us into your circle and hear us when we tell you that the shit that you're doing and saying is wrong and affects people on a larger scale than you realize, maybe then you'll stop saying stupid shit like that and costing people their livelihoods. So that's all I'm gonna say on the matter. Bye, Maya.
First time I remember thinking about my race is when I was 5 and I went to visit my grandma in Philadelphia for the first time. I remember standing in a store and swearing that I was going to move to Philadelphia when I got older. So it was the first time I'd been in a city where most of the people looked like me, and I'd never seen that many black people before in my life. It really started to hit me when I was in middle school, and I was just subjected to a lot of stereotypes, good and bad. I was in chorus, and so obviously I was needed to sway and clap, which is an easy thing that most people should do. But there was always this idea that, like, oh, these white kids in a suburban school can't sway and clap at the same time, which they couldn't. But because I was black, I was expected to have rhythm or be a good dancer. Not a good dancer, and I don't have rhythm. So I always felt an additional pressure to be good at those things, and I always put in more effort because I knew how bad of a dancer I was, and I didn't want people to think that I was failing at being black, I guess. I remember being in art class in 8th grade, and there was this other black kid sitting at a table with me. It said something about me not liking fried chicken. I like fried chicken that you get at Chick-fil-A. I don't like fried chicken on a drumstick. And then he started grilling me and like quizzing me on whether or not I was black enough. It's like, oh, you don't like fried chicken? What about watermelon? What about Jell-O? What about Kool-Aid? And I was apparently failing his test because these weren't my favorite things in the world. They're tolerable, but they're not things I really go for. And I felt kind of awful. This wasn't the first time someone had mentioned me not being black enough. It was the first time I'd gotten it from another black person, which sucked. I had always been everyone's whitest black friend. Like, people told me, oh, you're the whitest black person you know. Oh, you're basically an Oreo. Oh my god, I'm blacker than you. Which I'm sure they meant as a compliment, and they all said it with good intentions, but good intentions don't cover up a bad act. I still respect these people, but I took a long time for me to realize that that wasn't a compliment, and to like be happy with myself as a black person, because I always felt like I never fit into black culture. It's part of the reason I didn't apply to be in an HBCU, and I am once again going to a PWI because I didn't feel like I would fit in because I wasn't black enough.
I realized this when I was about 9 years old. I was in 3rd grade, and it started not even with the student, it started with a teacher. She pulled me into a classroom. We were doing some type of speed reading or something of that nature. And she pulled me into a classroom with another teacher, and she asked me if I was from the hood. I knew then that I was going to be treated differently. And it wasn't outright racism. Not these days, it's not going to be. It's mostly microaggressions, stereotypes, things like that. And I mostly was hit with stereotypes and microaggressions. Assuming that someone's from the hood because of their skin color or because of how they carry themselves, but I didn't carry myself a certain way. I was 9, so it was obviously because of my skin color. And I was new. I was probably one of the only black kids in that classroom at that time. All through elementary school, it was kind of like that. My name is also Kadira, so it's not an easy name. It's not Sally, it's not Karen, it's not Barbara. It seemed like they were purposely mispronouncing my name because they were too lazy to spell out the letters and say it right. They would see that the teachers didn't care how my name was pronounced. They didn't recognize how it was pronounced, so the students would start to laugh. They would start to mispronounce it on purpose, calling me Quadria, Kadira, quadrilateral. At a point in time, it was almost like, do I laugh with them? Do I cry? What do I do? And it was a very confusing time for me. But they didn't stop there, because in middle school it got progressively worse. I think the only regular class that I was in was math. regular math. Everything else was pre-AP, AP. I was probably only one of the few black kids. AP classes would ask me, oh, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Do you know this person? And it wasn't like, oh, do you know them? I know them too. It was always seeming to be a black person. Like, well, do you know this person? Do you know that person? And I would say, oh no, I don't know this person. And they say, oh, I just thought you did because, you know, you guys are black, you know. I thought that was either one of your good friends or it was your brother. And you're in high school, it's obviously in high school you want to fit in and you want to make as many friends as possible and you want to, you know, connect. And it was almost like I couldn't connect, but it wasn't something that I could control. I couldn't connect because I was black. And it just really showed me that I wasn't one of them. And I like that God made me black. And just because people are not comfortable in your skin, in the skin that you rock, in the skin that you are, and who you are, does not mean that you're any less than you are.
The time in which I realized I was South Asian or Indian was in elementary school, when I used to be called out and made fun of for my Indian school lunches. I was told that they smelled gross, they smelled like curry, and even though that's not what it was, from then onwards I felt very ashamed to be Indian, to really value my culture that I came from, and I really tried to assimilate with white culture. And I told my mom I didn't want any kind of Indian food for lunch because I didn't want to be made fun of, and I only took sandwiches, what would be classified as white lunch food, to lunch. And I began hating the fact that I was Indian, and I couldn't hide that in any way.
Hi guys, my name is Kaylin and I'm really excited to be a part of this video. I actually have a few instances where I've felt racially discriminated and racially profiled starting from really young. So today's headline for each sentence are the times when I realized that I was Asian. It started off when I was in elementary school. I brought lunch that didn't look like everyone else's. It was rice and seaweed that my mom had made for me, and people were just like, oh my gosh, that is so gross. And kids were making fun of me for the things that I was eating, and it made me really ashamed of my culture from really early on. And I would always get asked if I eat dogs, if I eat this, if I eat that, and why do I eat this? And it was really sad for me to experience, and I hate seeing that. And I think that's a common thing that most Asian Americans experience, because it makes them not want to eat those things because it's not what everyone else is doing. They don't have the typical fruit snacks, turkey sandwiches, whatever. So I remember experiencing that really young on, and even asking my mom to change what she would pack me for lunch because I didn't want to experience that anymore, and it's really sad. Another time when I realized that I was Asian, when people are shocked that I can speak English, and I can speak English well because I don't look like I'm an American. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I am an American citizen, but because I don't look like it, I'm automatically assumed that I can't speak the language. And that's just really sad because I'm just like you. I was born here and I learned English just like you. Automatically being referred to as Chinese, apparently the only Asian race out there, but no, I'm a Korean American. I'm not Chinese, and getting those ching chongs, whatever slangs thrown at me, but those are not even real, terms in the Asian language. People would ask me what my real name was because they didn't believe that my name could be the name that it is. So my name is Kaylin, again, and I do know that in Asian cultures, a lot of people have their legal name to be their Asian name that their parents named them, and then they will use an American name to be referred by, and that's fine. And it's pretty common, but it's not always the case. So people would always ask me, oh, what's your real name? What's your real name? And I'm like, I just told you my real name. So, also just those times I realized when I was Asian, when people would be like, oh, do you just do nails? What do you do? Are you good at math? And just those stereotypical Asian jobs and stereotypes that Asians are supposed to be good at, when we can be good at whatever we want to be. Everyone is unique and their own person. They don't have to always follow the norm. I guess some microaggressions would be like, oh, you're really pretty, but for an Asian girl, you're really athletic for an Asian girl. Why can't I just be those things without having my race associated with it? Something more common, or more recent, I guess is a better word for it, in the group fitness world, I was you know, entering a predominantly white community, and it still really is heavily a white-based community, and it was really intimidating for me. I definitely felt like I was treated differently when I would walk into studios, take other people's classes, and that's what really drove me to feel more inclined to accept everybody. My dog just walked in. To accept everyone for who they are and not look at their skin color. And, you know, just being a person of color and being an instructor is so inspiring for me, because I wish I had seen more people of color on the stand, on the podium. It would make me feel more included right from the start. And I hope that I'm able to give back to those who take my classes and, you know, feel like they can be a part of any community they want to, regardless of the amount of, you know, people who are not their race. And I guess the last thing I really want to say was, probably the most recent was, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, that my experiences with COVID-19, I actually have been racially discriminated because of COVID-19, which is something that I never thought I would have to experience, because, you know, obviously their talk is that it came from China and Asians are really taking the hit for it. And I remember being at Costco and, you know, people would look at me and felt really uncomfortable because of the way that they were looking at me. And I did have a man approach me and he was making the signal for me to go wash my hands. And obviously it just didn't really feel good. End of the day is that I think minorities do experience a lot of discrimination very early on, and it makes them ashamed to be who they are. And I really fought this my whole entire life, fought my identity, fought who I wanted to be. I was ashamed of my culture, I was ashamed of my family, and, you know, that's so sad to think about now, because, you know, I love my family and I love my culture and I'm proud of who I am because of who I am. And I think that the defining characteristics of a person rely on, you know, their integrity, their character, their honesty, and not the color of my skin. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope that this was a little bit more insightful on the things that people of color deal with from very early on. Thanks, guys.
I think the times when I realized I was Indian were when, mainly on the basketball court, you know, growing up, you know, just the stereotypical little Indian kid, you know, not big enough, shouldn't be playing basketball, shouldn't be playing sport, should just, like, you know, be in the classroom or be at home, just like studying all the time and just in the books.
The first time that I realized I was Latina, or rather the first time I realized I was Latina and that meant something for my social standing, was on the first day of kindergarten. The teacher read my name off of the roster, which is Paloma Blanca Renteria, and she asked my mom in a kind of like annoyed voice, like, ugh, does she speak English? And my mom told her, yes, she does speak English. And the teacher came to realize that I actually spoke English pretty well, and that I was pretty ahead of my age range. So she suggested that I take some gifted classes, which I did. Now, all of my other Latino friends were in ESL, and I was the only Latino in these gifted classes. So once I was in those classes, my other Latino friends told me that I was acting white. They said that because I spoke English well, because I made good grades, and because all the other kids in that classroom were white, that I was acting white. Even in these spaces, the gifted classes, I was very hyper aware of how teachers and students saw me. I didn't have the luxury of just being myself. I was the representation of my race, being the only one there. So I thought that if I was slacking off, then I would reinforce the lazy Mexican stereotype. That maybe if I excelled, I could make them think that Latinos can be really smart too. So obviously this is a lot of pressure for a 5-year-old, and it's something that affected me all through school. But the question I was trying to wrap my head around, that I didn't know how to express then, but I can better now, is why it was that being academically successful was only associated with being white.
A time in which I knew I was Indian was when I got called a model minority, and when someone called me pretty for an Indian.
Maya asked if we could throw together a video of times I realized I was Asian and not white. I only have a handful of experiences, but I thought it'd be important to share these with y'all. There was this defining moment at church, of all places, and I was sitting in a pew behind these children, and they kept looking behind them and like at me, and I could tell that very quickly that they had never really seen a person of color, and they kept looking at me curiously, and I would smile to them that I was nice. When it comes to a certain part of service or mass, we turn around to our neighbors and we shake their hand and say, "Peace be with you." They turned around, looked at me, and then looked at their parents to see if they were going to take my hand. And the parents just kind of looked at my parents and myself and just nodded their head, said, "Peace be with you." It was that moment when it kind of defined for me when I realized I was Asian and not white. I grew up here in Dallas. I went to a lot of the private schools here, so I grew up around white people. I really thought of myself as a white person, essentially. I never really was called out for my race, thank God, in school. People never really pointed that out, and it wasn't until I was at church, of all places, when I felt that for the first time. There are times when I have realized that I'm Asian when patients have asked, "Where are you from?" Of course, I honestly answer, "I'm from Dallas," and then they follow up with, "Where are you really from?" Which I recognize they probably don't mean any harm by it. Probably just don't know that it's okay to ask me what my ethnicity is. I just politely say my parents are from the Philippines, but I grew up here in Dallas. There have also been times at work when patients have requested a nurse without an accent. I work with a lot of nurses who are from Asia, India, Nigeria, just like great cultures. We take into account that the patient might not be able to understand what the nurse is saying, but also there's also times when they just don't want to be patient and try to understand their nurse. And there's frustrations with the language barrier. Those are times when I really realized that I was Asian and not white. There have been times when I've been called the whitest Asian, or I've called myself a coconut, and I will take fault in that microaggression. You know, I have a lot of learning to do during this time too.
The first time that I realized that I was South Asian, particularly Bengali, was in the 3rd grade when I decided to go by Mush instead of Mushfecker. And frankly, in the moment, I really thought I had done something, because I thought that I had finally overcome this hurdle of needing to validate myself to a group of people who just wouldn't quit asking questions like, why are you called Mushfecker? Why would your parents name you like that? How do you pronounce Mushfecker? What does Mushfecker mean? And those questions were in addition to, I would say, worse judgments and comments about how people thought that I should pronounce my name, how people thought that I should shorten my name, their judgments about the nature of my name. And so I thought by giving them this nickname that I was ending the discussion and that it was going to be over. But sadly, for 3rd grade me, while those questions in particular ended, they were replaced by other questions and other subsequent moments that dug deeper into my existence. For example, I received a lot of questions about my faith. I received questions like, as a Muslim man, do you treat your mom and your sister differently than how you treat other people, particularly men? You know, questions about my mom, and questions particularly about why does my mom not wear Western dress? And even like going into middle and high school, I'd get questions about my food and the things that I brought to school. Like, why does your lunch smell like that? What kind of lunch is that? That's not a normal lunch? And you know, comments and questions like that. And so every single one of these moments, first of all, made me realize that I was Bengali, but second of all, also made me realize that I'm just not white. And by being not white, I'm subject to this pressure to explain my existence and essentially why I should exist to a group of people who don't face similar pressures. And that realization in itself is suffocating.
Hello, my name is JD Gonzalez. I'm 32 years old and I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I like to think that for most of my life, I've known that I've lived a slightly more privileged upbringing, had opportunities that I think the majority of people have not had. So I'd like to start my story by saying that I went to a Catholic grade school here in Dallas. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, Jesuit, in Dallas. Graduated with 250-ish men, where there was maybe 15 to 20 other Hispanics, maybe 15 to 20 black people in my grade. So while we weren't overwhelmingly the minority, there was definitely more Caucasian people just in my regular upbringing, and just more kind of white, wealthy families a part of my life. It probably took me until I was around 19 or 20 to really understand and realize the advantages I had from my parents sacrificing so much to put me in the position that I had, to have the opportunities that I had. And while I think this is an incredibly wonderful project by Maya, there's one story in particular that has always kind of just stood out in my head. I was probably 20 years old, sophomore, maybe a freshman, so I must have been a little younger than that actually. And I was driving north to Oklahoma to visit a girl I was dating at the time. And I was with a buddy of mine, and we were maybe safely going 5 to 10 miles above the speed limit. Nothing too incredible, but you know, when you're on a 3-hour drive and you start cruising, you know, pick up a little speed every now and then. There was a speed trap ready to go, and maybe I was used to the way the officer looked at me. It was a pretty dirty look. He really eyed me down, and as we were driving by, kind of really gave you the, you know, the whole shebang. My friend, my buddy, as we continued to go, we realized he wasn't going to pull us over. So number one, we were relieved about that. And he was like, I have never seen in my life a cop give such a dirty stare in our direction. And he was like, it's really occurring to me right now that I feel like my good friends always have good, respectful conversations about backgrounds, ethnicities, how different upbringings have different advantages. Even though it happened in that moment, I realized that it was so normal to me, the way that white officer had looked at me, that it really opened up my eyes, because he had never really seen an officer kind of look in that direction quite like that. So, and you know, sometimes I think back and think, maybe I caught the officer on a bad day. Maybe he knew I was speeding, but knew that he didn't really have enough to pull me over. But you know, I think back too and think, no, maybe not. I know that story's a little tame, maybe for what we're going to be hearing and seeing. But that story to me, when I was 19-ish, always really signaled to me that even though that person was supposed to be there for the good, I could really, in his eyes and through his stare, he didn't even have to use words. I could kind of feel his judgment on me as a person.
I realized that I was going to be treated differently because I was Indian when a boy said to me that no one would date me because I was Indian and I was a brown girl.
The times I realized I was Asian in the United States was when Jordan Erickson would make fun of me at lunch for having small eyes by using this gesture. The times that my peers in the 4th grade would ask me for help on the math homework because all Asians are good at math. And the one that hurt the most, when one of the parents of the students that I taught claimed that I was too scary and intimidating because all Asians are tiger-like when it comes to playing the piano. Those are just some of the times, not all of them.
Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed the videos from my friends, and by enjoyed I mean like took note, reevaluated some of the shit you say to your friends of color. Hopefully you realized how you can do better, you realized how you can better educate your parents, how you can better educate your friends, or cut them off accordingly if they're not willing to do so. And I think my parting words for this video are just donate in any way that you can, sign all the petitions that you fucking can, do what you gotta do. There's a Black Lives Matter highlight on my Instagram. I'll link my social media down below and you can go click it for a lot of information. Rewatch this anytime you're like, what does it feel like to be a person of color, or a person of color that isn't my particular race, that isn't white? Because I'm gonna look back on this as a black person. I'm like, let me go look back and see what my Indian friends are feeling. Let me go look back and see what my East Asian friends are feeling. Let me go look back and see how my Latinx/Hispanic friends are feeling, etc., etc., etc. Thank you. Hope you guys have a great day, and peace.